The endless droning of Ambassador Vexitar's voice echoed through the massive crystal dome of Nexus Prime Station like a sleeping pill made of sound. His 6 eyes blinked in sequence as he gestured with 4 arms toward holographic mineral charts that nobody cared about. Around the circular chamber, delegates from 11 different alien species tried their best to look interested while secretly planning their lunch breaks. Chancellor Brix of the Consortium tapped his metallic claws against his armrest, creating a rhythmic clicking that annoyed the insectoid representative from the Hive Collective. The bug-like alien's antennae twitched in irritation, while the floating gas cloud entity from Nebula Prime pulsed with bored colors that shifted from deep purple to sickly green. The mining rights to asteroid belt Gamma 7 remain in dispute, Vextar continued, his voice carrying the enthusiasm of old dishwater. The hegemony claims priority due to our discovery protocols, but the Trade Federation insists their survey markers were placed first. Several delegates had given up all pretense of attention. The reptilian senator from Scalaris Prime was openly napping, his forked tongue occasionally flicking out to taste the recycled air. Even the station's cleaning robots moved with more energy than the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering that deserved better than this tedious gathering. Transparent walls offered a breathtaking view of the star field beyond, while gravity generators created comfortable zones for species that ranged from aquatic to crystalline to pure energy. Universal translators hummed constantly, converting dozens of alien languages into comprehensible speech, though right now most of them were processing variations of "when will this end?" That's when everything changed in the span of a heartbeat. Fuddy. Proximity alarms didn't just ring, they screamed like banshees in the night. Red warning lights bathed the chamber in crimson as every screen flickered to life with emergency displays. The lazy atmosphere vanished instantly as centuries of survival instincts kicked in across multiple species. Proximity. Alert. Proximity. Alert! The station's AI voice cut through the chaos with mechanical precision. Unknown vessels detected at bearing 27 Mark IV. Fleet composition, 67 ships of unprecedented design. No identification codes broadcast. No standard communication protocols engaged. Threat assessment, unknown. The chamber erupted into controlled panic. Delegates who had been half asleep moments before now stood at full alert, their various appendages reaching for personal communication devices. The Hive Collective representatives' compound eyes swiveled independently, scanning multiple displays simultaneously, while the crystalline delegate from Prism World began glowing with agitated light patterns. Through the transparent dome above them, something impossible began to unfold. Space itself seemed to ripple like water as massive shapes materialized from the void. Not the familiar flash and fade of standard hyperspace exits, but a gradual manifestation that defied known physics. The ships that emerged were unlike anything in the Council's extensive databases. Their hulls were smooth as polished stones, dark as the space between stars, and seemed to bend light around their edges like cosmic mirages. No visible engines, no exhaust trails, no energy signatures that matched any known technology. They moved with the grace of predators and the silence of ghosts. "Impossible," Chancellor Brix whispered, his voice barely audible above the alarm klaxons. His usually steady hands trembled as he gripped his chair's armrests. "Our deep space sensors should have detected any approaching fleet hours ago. The early warning network extends 3 light-years in all directions. The Trade Federation's ambassador, a blob-like creature that communicated through color changes, flashed rapid sequences of yellow and orange, the equivalent of panicked shouting. The Scalaris Prime representative was now fully awake, his serpentine neck craned upward to study the mysterious vessels with predatory interest. But it was the Hive Collective's delegate who spoke the words everyone was thinking. "Those ships. They're not in our database, not any variation of known technology. It's as if they appeared from nowhere. 67 vessels arranged themselves in perfect formation around Nexus Prime Station like pieces on a cosmic chessboard. Each ship was roughly the size of a council cruiser, But their alien design made size comparisons difficult. They maintained precise distances from each other and from the station, creating geometric patterns that suggested military discipline and tactical thinking. Meanwhile, aboard the lead vessel designated Harmony, Admiral Lee Ji-ho stood perfectly, still on his bridge, hands clasped behind his back as he watched the alien station through his main view screen. The Korean officer's face showed no emotion, but his dark eyes missed nothing as he studied the impressive structure that housed the galaxy's ruling council. Behind him, his tactical officer Kim Da-hee monitored multiple screens showing communication intercepts from the station. Her fingers danced across holographic displays as she filtered through the flood of panicked alien chatter in dozens of languages. "Captain Park Min-ho reports all ships in position, sir," Da-hee announced, without looking up from her station. "Formation. Alpha 7 is locked." The aliens seem quite surprised by our arrival. Their communication channels are flooded with emergency broadcasts. "Excellent," Ji-ho replied, his voice carrying the calm confidence of someone who had planned this moment for years. Surprise was always the point of this operation. "Have Dr. Cho confirmed that our stealth systems are still masking our energy? Signatures?" "Confirmed, sir. To their sensors, we're barely there." "Perfect. Now let's introduce ourselves properly." Ji-ho stepped forward, his reflection briefly visible in the dark surface of his view screen. "Kim Da-hee, open a channel to Nexus. Prime Station. It's time the galaxy learned that Earth has arrived." The council chamber transformed from organized government to complete chaos in seconds. Delegates who had spent centuries perfecting diplomatic calm now screamed at each other like angry children. The insectoid representative from the Hive Collective clicked his mandibles rapidly while waving all 6 arms, demanding immediate military action. His compound eyes reflected the red emergency lights as he buzzed threats in his native language. The crystalline being from Prism World pulsed with angry orange light, creating rainbow patterns across the chamber walls as she argued for immediate evacuation. Her voice sounded like wind chimes in a hurricane as she insisted the mysterious fleet spelled doom for everyone present. "Silence! Silence!" Chancellor Brix roared, his metallic voice cutting through the noise like a blade. The veteran diplomat had survived 3 galactic wars and countless political crises, but even he looked shaken by the sudden appearance of the unknown fleet. His 4 eyes darted between the screens, showing the mysterious ships and his panicking colleagues. The reptilian senator from Scalaris Prime coiled his long body into a defensive posture, tongue flicking out to taste the fear-scented air. "Those ships could vaporize this station before our defense systems even charge," he hissed. "We should negotiate from a position of strength, not panic." "What strength?" snapped the Trade Federation's blob-like ambassador, his gelatinous form shifting colors rapidly from purple to red. "Unknown technology, unknown capabilities, unknown intentions. We know nothing about these intruders." That's when the voice cut through their arguments like a sword through silk. "Attention, Nexus Prime Station." The words came through the chamber's communication system with crystal clarity, spoken in a language none of them recognized, yet somehow perfectly understandable. The universal translators hummed and whirred, working overtime to process the alien speech patterns before settling into standard galactic. Every delegate froze. The chamber fell so quiet, they could hear the station's life support system cycling. Air through the ventilation ducts. Even the cleaning robots stopped their endless polishing to listen. "This is Admiral Lee Ji-ho of the Terran Fleet," the voice continued with calm authority that suggested its owner was completely unimpressed by their mighty council. "We request immediate audience with the full Galactic Council regarding matters of mutual concern." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Chancellor Brix felt his 3 hearts beating in different rhythms as he processed what he'd just heard. Terran Fleet. The name meant nothing to him, but the confidence in that voice suggested these newcomers believed themselves equals to the mighty council. Brix activated his personal console and quickly searched the database for any reference to Terran or Earth. The results made his blood run cold. Sector 7G contained several pre-spaceflight worlds under observation, including one called Earth, populated by bipedal mammals who had barely figured out basic nuclear technology. "Unknown vessels," Brix replied, his diplomatic training taking over despite his confusion. "You have violated 12 separate interstellar treaties by approaching this station without proper clearance codes. Identify your species and home system immediately." The response came without hesitation, as if the speaker had expected this exact question. "We are humans from the planet Earth, Sector 7G of your star charts. We request immediate diplomatic audience with your governing body." The chamber erupted again, but this time with confused whispers instead of angry shouts. Council members frantically accessed their personal databases, cross-referencing the information. The Hive Collective representative's antennae twitched as he processed the impossible data. "Earth shows as a pre-industrial civilization in our monitoring reports," buzzed the insectoid delegate. Last survey indicated they were still using primitive fossil fuels and had barely achieved orbital flight capability. The crystalline being from Prism World flickered with confused yellow light. "Our deep space monitors show no technological advancement from that sector. These claims are impossible." Chancellor Brix felt a cold dread settling in his stomach as he realized the implications. Either their monitoring systems had failed catastrophically, or these humans had somehow hidden their true capabilities for decades. Neither option was comforting. "Your request is noted," Brix responded carefully, buying time to think. "However, first contact protocols require extensive quarantine and evaluation procedures. These protocols exist for the safety of all parties involved. Please maintain your current position while we initiate proper—" His words died in his throat as every screen in the chamber flickered simultaneously. The emergency displays, the diplomatic channels, the security monitors, even the environmental controls, everything went dark for one terrifying heartbeat. Then they all displayed the same message in perfect standard galactic script. "Council database access granted. Welcome, Earth diplomatic mission." The silence that followed was absolute. Not even the life support systems seemed to be running as 12 different species stared at screens that should have been impossible to hack. The Council's security systems were legendary, protected by quantum encryption that had never been broken. "Impossible," whispered the Trade Federation ambassador, his blob-like form turning a sickly shade of green. "Our networks are completely isolated from external access. The firewalls are mathematical impossibilities to crack." The reptilian senator's pupils dilated to pinpricks as he processed the implications. "They're inside our systems, all of them. Everything we have, they can see." Aboard the Harmony, Dr. Cho Min-seo looked up from her sleek console with satisfaction written across her young face. Banks of holographic displays showed her complete access to the station's central networks, including files marked with security classifications that would make lesser hackers weep. "Admiral, I've successfully interfaced with their central network," she reported with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. "Their security protocols are remarkably primitive. It's like they're still using stone knives while we're working with plasma cutters." Admiral Lee Jiho nodded approvingly while keeping his eyes fixed on the alien station filling his view screen. The massive structure looked impressive from the outside, but he knew appearances could be deceiving. After all, his own ships probably looked impossible to the aliens watching them. "Excellent work, Doctor." "Show them we mean business," Jiho replied, calmly. "But be gentle about it. We're here to have a conversation, not to conquer anyone yet." The last word carried just enough weight to remind everyone on the bridge that diplomacy was their first choice, but not their only option. The massive screens surrounding the council chamber began displaying information that made seasoned diplomats from across the galaxy turn pale, or whatever color their species displayed when terrified. Classified documents scrolled past in neat columns, each one a carefully guarded secret that had taken decades to accumulate. Military deployment schedules, private communications between species leaders, detailed financial records of illegal operations and surveillance footage from worlds that supposedly didn't know about galactic civilization. The insectoid representative from the Hive Collective watched in horror as his personal communications with black market gene traders appeared on screen. His compound eyes darted frantically between displays, showing clandestine meetings and illegal bioweapon research that his government had spent fortunes to keep hidden. His mandibles clicked nervously as he realized his entire political career was about to evaporate. The crystalline being from Prism World dimmed to a dull gray as footage of her species' secret mining operations played for everyone to see. Worlds they claimed to be protecting under council mandate were being systematically stripped of rare minerals, while their native populations slowly died from mysterious illnesses. The evidence was overwhelming and impossible to deny. That's when the air in the center of the chamber began to shimmer like heat rising from summer pavement. Particles of light gathered and swirled, forming the outline of a human figure that gradually became solid and real. The holographic projection was so perfect that several delegates instinctively reached for their weapons before realizing they were looking at advanced technology, not an actual intruder. Captain Park Min-ho materialized with the calm confidence of someone walking into his own living room. The Korean diplomat stood perfectly straight in his dark uniform, hands clasped behind his back as he surveyed the assembled representatives of galactic civilization with analytical eyes. His presence commanded attention without demanding it, like a teacher entering a classroom full of misbehaving students. The contrast was striking. While alien delegates shifted nervously in their seats, whispered frantically to their aides, or stared in shock at the damning evidence surrounding them, this human stood perfectly still and composed. He looked like someone who had expected this exact reaction and found it mildly interesting rather than concerning. "Honored council members," Min-ho began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustic systems. His tone was respectful, but carried an undertone that suggested he was being polite by choice, not necessity. "We come not as supplicants seeking membership in your organization, but as concerned neighbors addressing criminal activity in our shared galaxy." The words hit the chamber like a physical blow. Several delegates gasped audibly. The reptilian senator from Scalaris Prime coiled his body tighter, while the blob-like Trade Federation ambassador began rapidly shifting through colors that indicated extreme distress. Ambassador Vexitar of the Hegemony shot to his feet like a spring-loaded weapon, his elaborate crest flaring wide in a display of aggression that had intimidated opponents for decades. His forearms gestured wildly as his voice rose to a near roar. "You speak of crimes. You've just committed the greatest violation of diplomatic protocol in galactic history. You've invaded our most secure networks, stolen classified information, and now you stand here lecturing us?" Min-ho's expression didn't change by even a millimeter. He simply nodded as if Vexitar had made a perfectly reasonable observation. "Indeed we have," he acknowledged, without any hint of apology or shame. "Just as you've violated the sovereignty of 17 developing worlds under your supposed protection." The screens around them shifted with seamless precision, displaying new evidence that made the previous revelations look tame by comparison. Aerial footage of massive mining operations on pristine worlds showed mechanical harvesters stripping away entire forests while native populations cowered in caves. Underground laboratories revealed horrific genetic experiments being performed on captured creatures that clearly showed signs of intelligence and suffering. "The planet Kepler 442b, Min-ho continued in the same calm tone he might use to discuss the weather, "where the consortium has been slowly poisoning the atmosphere with industrial chemicals to eliminate the native population for easier strip mining. Operations. Current estimates suggest the Keplerian species will be extinct within 50 standard years." The consortium's representative, a tall being covered in metallic scales, visibly shrank in his chair as detailed chemical analysis reports filled the screens. The evidence was irrefutable. Atmospheric processors designed to look like terraforming. Equipment were actually pumping toxins into the air that specifically targeted the biology of the planet's native inhabitants. Orglisa 6167C. Min-ho moved to his next example with prosecutorial precision, where the hegemony has been conducting genetic experiments on the local fauna, including the sentient crystalline entities that you've deliberately classified as non-intelligent minerals to avoid non-interference directive violations. Vextar's crest deflated slightly, as footage showed his species scientists extracting consciousness from living crystal beings and transferring it into laboratory specimens. The crystalline delegate from Prism World pulsed with outraged light, Patterns as she recognized her own distant relatives being tortured in the name of scientific advancement. The evidence kept coming in waves that overwhelmed any attempt at denial. Secret military bases on protected worlds, slave trading operations disguised as cultural exchange programs, systematic genocide covered up as natural disasters, and biological warfare testing on primitive species that had no way to defend themselves. Chancellor. Brix felt his carefully constructed political career crumbling around him as decades of corruption were laid bare for everyone to see. His voice shook with barely controlled rage and terror when he finally found the strength to speak. These are internal affairs of sovereign council member species. You have no authority to judge our actions or interfere in our policies. His words were met by a new voice that cut through the chamber's tense atmosphere like a blade. Lieutenant. Yoon Hazel appeared on the screens, speaking from her position aboard one of the mysterious Earth vessels. The young tactical officer's face was set in grim determination as she addressed the council with military directness. "We have the authority of documentation," she interrupted, with the confidence of someone holding all the winning cards. "Every violation of your own non-interference directive catalogued and verified. Every illegal annexation recorded with timestamp and coordinates. Every genocide disguised as developmental assistance documented with survivor testimony and forensic evidence." The chamber fell silent, except for the quiet hum of life support systems and the barely audible whimpering of several delegates who realized their careers, and possibly their lives, were over. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable, and damning beyond any possibility of defense. Yoon Hazel's next words dropped into that silence like stones into a still pond. "The question isn't whether these crimes occurred. The question is whether you'd prefer to discuss solutions privately with us, or whether we should broadcast these findings to every inhabited world in council space and let your own citizens decide your fates." The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. Admiral Kethran of the Hegemony reached for his personal emergency communicator with hands that trembled slightly despite his military training. As the highest-ranking fleet commander present, he had the authority to call in the Hegemony's entire battle fleet, enough firepower to reduce this mysterious human fleet to cosmic dust. His clawed fingers activated the quantum-encrypted emergency beacon that should have instantly alerted every Hegemony vessel within 3 star systems. Instead of the sharp confirmation tone he expected, his communicator began playing what sounded like ancient Earth classical music. Beethoven's Symphony No. 9 filled his personal audio channel with beautiful, haunting melodies that had absolutely no business being there. "What in the 7 hells?" Kethran snarled, frantically adjusting his communication settings. Every frequency he tried gave him the same result: more classical music. Mozart, Bach, Tchaikovsky, an entire concert of human composers flowed through military channels that were supposed to be impossible to intercept, let alone override, around the chamber. Other military representatives were experiencing similar problems. The crystalline being from Prism World discovered her emergency transmissions were being replaced by what appeared to be human jazz music. The insectoid hive collective delegate found his quantum-encrypted military channels playing something called rock and roll that made his antennae vibrate uncomfortably. "How is this possible?" Admiral Kethran demanded, his voice rising to a near roar. "Quantum encryption is mathematically unbreakable. The probability algorithms alone should make interference impossible according to your current understanding of mathematics," interrupted a new voice that appeared with calm authority. Dr. Cho Min-seo materialized via hologram beside Captain Minho, her youthful appearance contrasting sharply with the advanced knowledge gleaming in her eyes. She looked barely old enough to graduate from university, yet spoke with the confidence of someone who had rewritten the laws of physics during her lunch break. "Your quantum encryption relies on mathematical principles my species solved 3 centuries ago," she explained with the patience of a teacher addressing slow students. "What you consider impossible, we mastered around the time we were still using wooden sailing ships to explore our own planet's oceans." The chamber fell into stunned silence as the implications sank in. If humans had been this advanced for centuries, then everything the Council believed about technological development was wrong. Species that prided themselves on being the galaxy's intellectual elite were suddenly faced with the uncomfortable realization that they might be the equivalent of children playing with toys. We've been monitoring Council activities since our first radio telescopes detected your transmissions, Dr. Cho continued, pulling up holographic displays that showed decades of intercepted alien communications. When we developed faster-than-light travel 50 years ago, we chose to observe rather than reveal ourselves. It seemed wise to study our neighbors before announcing our presence. Chancellor Brix felt his world crumbling around him as he processed this information. 50 years. His voice cracked like old leather under stress. But our most recent surveys showed Earth barely had primitive satellites. Your species was still burning fossil fuels and hadn't even established permanent space colonies. Captain, Minho's slight smile carried the warmth of someone sharing a particularly clever joke. Misdirection, he replied smoothly. We found it extremely useful to let you believe we were decades behind our actual development level. It gave us all the time we needed to study your methods, your technologies, and most importantly, your ethics. The screens around the chamber shifted to display a comprehensive timeline that made several delegates gasp in recognition. It showed Earth's secret advancement in perfect detail, the development of faster-than-light travel disguised as failed satellite launches, the establishment of hidden monitoring stations throughout Council space, and the careful documentation of every Council violation over the past 5 decades. You see, Dr. Cho added helpfully, we learned early that civilizations capable of interstellar travel weren't necessarily civilizations worth trusting. So we watched. We learned. We prepared. The evidence was overwhelming. Hidden human outposts had been observing Council activities from stealth platforms that their sensors had never detected. Earthships had been moving freely through Council space for decades, studying alien technology and documenting criminal activities while maintaining the illusion that humanity was still struggling with basic spaceflight. The 17 worlds. You've been exploiting are now under Earth's protection, Captain Minho announced, with the finality of someone stating a law of physics. We've established monitoring stations and defensive platforms around each system. Any further interference with these developing civilizations will be met with immediate response. As if summoned by his words, the holographic displays shifted to show massive space stations materializing around distant planets. These weren't the crude constructions the Council might have expected from a newly spacefaring species, but elegant structures that seemed to bend space around them like the human ships. Advanced defense platforms bristled with weapons technology that made Council military hardware look like ancient spears. A new figure materialized beside the other Earth representatives, Senator Jung Yuna of the Earth Defense Council. The middle-aged woman carried herself with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected entire star systems. Her uniform bore insignia that suggested she commanded resources that dwarfed most Council military budgets. We've already begun reversing the atmospheric damage on Kepler 442b, she announced with matter-of-fact efficiency. Our atmospheric processes are neutralizing the toxins your people introduced, and we're providing medical aid to species affected by hegemony genetic tampering. Consider it humanitarian assistance. The screen showed real-time footage of massive Earth vessels working around Kepler 442b, using technology that seemed to manipulate matter at the molecular level. Poisoned atmospheres were being cleaned in days rather than centuries, while injured, creatures were being treated with medical techniques that looked like magic to Council observers. This is impossible, whispered the Trade Federation ambassador, his blob-like form shifting through colors that indicated complete cognitive overload. The resources required for such operations would bankrupt entire star systems. Only if you're still thinking in terms of scarcity-based economics, Senator Jung replied with gentle amusement. We moved beyond those limitations sometime around the invention of matter synthesis. Resources become unlimited when you can build anything you need from base elements. The reptilian senator from Scalaris Prime coiled his body into a tight defensive spiral as he realized the true scope of human capabilities. You're saying your species has solved energy production, matter synthesis, and faster-than-light travel while maintaining perfect stealth from our sensors. Among other things, Dr. Cho confirmed cheerfully. We've also developed some rather interesting defensive technologies, as your fleet commanders are discovering right about now. On cue, reports began flooding in from Council military vessels. Throughout the system, their weapons wouldn't charge, their engines wouldn't respond, and their communication systems continued playing an endless playlist of human music. The mighty Council fleet, thousands of warships representing the combined military might of 12 civilizations, had been neutralized without a single shot being fired. The age of unchecked exploitation is over, Captain Minho declared with quiet finality. The question now is whether you'll adapt to this new reality peacefully, or whether we'll need to be more persuasive. The terms were laid out with the precision of a surgeon's blade and the finality of a judge's gavel. Captain Minho's holographic form stood perfectly still in the center of the chamber as he delivered humanity's ultimatum to the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. Each word carried the weight of absolute certainty, as if he were reading from a script that had already been written by the universe itself. "Cease all illegal activities immediately," he began, his voice echoing through the silent chamber. "Submit to Earth oversight for investigation and remediation of former violations. Accept humanity as a full council member with enforcement authority over interstellar law." He paused, allowing the words to sink in before delivering the final blow. "Or face public exposure of your documented crimes to every inhabited world in council space." The silence that followed was broken only by the nervous clicking of the Hive Collective representatives' mandibles and the barely audible whimpering of several delegates who were calculating the end of their careers, their fortunes, and possibly their lives. Ambassador Vextar of the Hegemony rose slowly from his seat, his elaborate crest now deflated and dull. His forearms shook with barely controlled rage as he pointed an accusing finger at the human hologram. "This is nothing but sophisticated extortion," he growled, his voice carrying the desperation of a cornered predator. "You're holding a gun to the head of galactic civilization and calling it diplomacy." Before Captain Minho could respond, another figure began materializing beside him. The air shimmered and coalesced into the form of General Nam Kyujin, whose military bearing and scarred face suggested someone who had seen real combat and emerged victorious. His uniform bore decorations that spoke of campaigns fought in the darkest corners of space, and his eyes held the steely determination of a person who had made hard choices and lived with the consequences. "This is justice," General Nam replied, with the quiet authority of someone who had spent his life protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. "You've operated without oversight for too long, believing that technological superiority gave you the right to treat developing civilizations as your personal resource farms. The galaxy needs sheriffs, and we're volunteering for the job." The word volunteering carried an undertone that suggested this wasn't really optional. The assembled delegates understood that humanity wasn't asking for permission. They were announcing a new reality and giving the Council a choice in how to respond to it. The vote that followed was a masterpiece of political theater and practical desperation. The three species with the most egregious violations, the Consortium, the Hegemony, and the Trade Federation, voted immediately to accept Earth's terms. They had seen enough evidence to know that resistance would only result in their complete destruction. Their representatives cast their votes with the enthusiasm of patients accepting emergency surgery to save their lives. Two smaller species quickly followed suit, recognizing that aligning with the new power structure was infinitely preferable to being crushed by it. The crystalline being from Prism World pulsed with resigned blue light as she cast her vote, while the reptilian senator from Scalaris Prime coiled himself into a defensive posture and hissed his acceptance through clenched teeth. Within 6 hours, the Galactic Council found itself with a new member that wielded more real power than species who had been conquering star systems for millennia. The bureaucratic machinery that had taken centuries to establish was being restructured around the preferences of a species that most of them had considered primitive just that morning. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Civilizations that prided themselves on ancient wisdom and technological superiority, were now taking orders from what they had dismissed as barely evolved mammals from a backwater planet. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor that was both cosmic and cruel. Chancellor Briggs, his political career now clearly over, asked the question that haunted every delegate in the chamber. How did a single planet develop such advanced technology so quickly? His voice carried the bewilderment of someone whose entire understanding of reality had been shattered. Our models suggest it should take millennia to achieve what you've accomplished. Captain Minho's smile carried genuine warmth for the first time during the entire encounter. We had motivation, he replied simply. When you've seen what happens to civilizations that remain helpless in this galaxy, you develop a very strong incentive to become unhelpful very quickly. The screens around the chamber displayed footage from those 17 protected worlds, species that had been saved from extinction by timely human intervention. Creatures that had been on the verge of genocide now thrived under Earth's protection, while worlds that had been poisoned were being restored to their former beauty. You see, Dr. Cho added from her position beside the other holograms, we learned from your mistakes. Every atrocity we documented became a lesson in what not to become. Every violation we witnessed strengthened our resolve to do better. As the session concluded, and the Council began the humiliating process of restructuring their government to accommodate their new overseers, the Earth fleet maintained its perfect formation around Nexus Prime Station. The 67 vessels hung in space like silent guardians, their sleek hulls reflecting starlight in patterns that seemed almost artistic. Admiral Lee Jiho stood on the bridge of the Harmony, hands clasped behind his back as he watched the alien station through his main view screen. The massive structure that had once housed the galaxy's supreme authority now looked smaller somehow, diminished by the revelation that it had never been as powerful as its inhabitants believed. Dr. Cho, he said quietly, his voice carrying satisfaction, earned through decades of careful planning. Prepare a message to Earth Command. Tell them Phase 1 is complete. The galaxy is now aware that humanity has arrived, and that the age of unchecked exploitation is over. The stars looked different now, Admiral Jiho reflected as he gazed out at the infinite cosmos beyond the station. They seemed less vast and hostile, more like a neighborhood that finally had responsible adults keeping watch. The darkness between worlds no longer felt empty, it felt protected. Behind him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency, monitoring the alien responses and coordinating with Earth vessels throughout the galaxy. They were no longer explorers venturing into unknown space. They were peacekeepers in a universe that had forgotten what peace looked like. The age of galactic chaos was ending. The age of human oversight had begun. The